Hello, listeners, and welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 2 of the series, True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In this episode, I bring you 6 chilling tales of true ghost stories. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. Number 1. Breathing next to me. One time, I woke up around 3 a.m. Could this be a coincidence? I don't really think so. But someone was breathing next to me. I was still sort of sleepy, so for a second, I thought I heard myself breathing. Just to check, I held my breath for a while, but the breathing continued. I was wide awake now and could clearly hear someone breathing behind me. I was lying with my back towards them. It was as if someone was sleeping next to me. I was really scared. But eventually, I managed to move and turned on a light. I decided to turn around very slowly, but of course, I could not see anyone. I didn't go back to sleep after that. I just sat on my bed, trying to somehow find a rational explanation. Number 2. Haunted Attic Corner. This story is actually my first post on this subreddit. Growing up, I had several weird experiences in my parents' house in Orange, Virginia. Where we lived was a few miles away from a Civil War battlefield, which may explain some of it. But the entity that lived in my room was an entirely different story. To preface, I have seen ghosts before, a UFO and some other strange things, but this one was the most constant. My bedroom was the attic, probably close to a 500 square foot room that was oddly shaped and had a stairwell leading downstairs. To the left of the stairwell was the main bedroom area, and to the right was a small and unsettling alcove. The attic was fully furnished and had some small attic doors along the walls, which were creepy on their own, but that's a different story. The alcove had a small window, maybe about 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, if that. To the right of the window was an access door to the attic fan. Underneath was a bookshelf, and to the left was a storage door. Now, this particular area to the left was always a little darker, lighting-wise, for no real reason. Even when I had a backlight GoFlash tank there. This corner was right in front of the door. From my bed, on the left side of the room, I could clearly see the alcove, which was about 20 to 30 feet away. Most nights when I went to sleep, I would feel an ominous presence emanating from that corner. When my back was to it, I would feel heavily that something was staring at me. In the shadows, I could not make out a figure, but the feel of that gaze would send shivers down my neck and spine and prickle my skin. It never bothered me much beyond that. I think this presence liked me better than the previous inhabitant of the room, which was my older sister. She had told me stories of things being misplaced in the room and having weird feelings as well. One story stands out in my mind. Shortly before she moved out, her best friend came to live with us. My sister had the room set up similar to how I did, except you couldn't see the alcove from her bed. On this particular day, her friend had her suitcases stacked underneath the window. Her and my sister were talking and writing a story together when all of a sudden, bam! Her top, full suitcase was hurled from underneath the window and hit the bed. Mind you, this is about 20 to 30 feet away. It's not like it just casually fell. There was some other experiences my sister had that my mom told her not to tell me and my younger brother. My mother always dismissed these claims. Either she was in denial or whatever this being was did not affect her. I kept feeling this particular presence until I finally permanently moved out. My first night in this room, I remember I saw some sort of apparition. It looked like a small red fox, and it came from next to the closet door, which was on the other side of the stairs. I knew this fox couldn't have come from just anywhere. I saw it appear as if it were walking from that corner. This happened when I was young, maybe 13 or 14 at the time, and I ran downstairs and told my parents what I saw. They sort of laughed at me at first, and then got offended when I suggested it was supernatural. So I kind of told myself I was imagining things and went back up to bed. I never did see the fox apparition again after that. Fast forward to when I was in college. I would go home sometimes on breaks and feel the presence strongly at night after I would turn out the lights. I remember once I was home alone and was downstairs with the door to my room shut. My pets were laying in front of me when all of a sudden I heard heavy footsteps coming from above me, right where the alcove would be. My sister had similar experiences, but for some reason it was more aggressive with her. The last time I was at that house was when it was going into foreclosure, since my mother could no longer afford the mortgage. I got the rest of my stuff out and took the essentials with me. I was there with two of my friends who were helping me, and for the first time in my whole life, the presence was not there. It had seemingly vanished, since no longer anyone inhabited that room. I haven't been back since. The presence still haunts my memory, and even now I can vividly remember the feeling I had of its gaze upon me. Number 3, the voice. This event took place when I was 16. My father was away on a business trip, so my mother let me relax in their bedroom. I was on their waterbed and watching the television. My mother and my sister decided to watch TV in the living room. I had a bowl of popcorn and was watching a program, happily eating my popcorn. All of a sudden, it was as if all of the sound was removed from the room. It's hard to explain this, but it was as if a vacuum sucked out every single existing sound of that moment. The television, the underlying hum of the furnace, and the way of the sound of the general air that flows around your ears was completely silent. Then, in my right ear, I heard someone speak these exact words. "Excuse me, Kim." Now, I cannot tell you if the sound of the voice was that of a male or female. I just can't. But the voice was clear and strong. I froze in place. My heart began to pound in my chest, and I remember clutching my bowl of popcorn. Once again, I heard the same voice, the same sound, and the same words in my ear. "Excuse me, Kim." Somehow, I gained a severe blast of adrenaline, shot up from the waterbed, and leaped across it. My foot got stuck, jammed down between the water mattress and the wood frame, and nearly snapped my leg in two at the chin. The bowl of popcorn flew out of my hand, and the memory of the metal bowl and popcorn kernels flying all over the room is still very clear in my mind, as it all seemed to be happening in slow motion. I've been told that this is somehow an effect of an adrenaline rush. I flew out of the bedroom and raced out to my mother and sister, crying hysterically. Now, this is one of a few incidents that happened in that particular house, and I'll share more if anyone wants to hear them. By the way, my name is Kim. Number 4, the faceless boy. I was about 9 when this happened. My brother and I shared a room. I had the top bunk and he slept on the bottom. We went to bed together at the same time every night. It was a routine. My mom had bought me one of those infomercial train alarm clocks, and I had set it up next to my bed. Every morning, I would wake up, look at the clock tower on the alarm clock, turn off the alarm, and get up for school. This was a school night, and I was lying in bed playing Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for Game Boy Advance, and happy as any other kid could be. My mom came into my room and told my brother and me to go to sleep, so we did. I would sometimes wake up early in the morning to use the restroom, so I would slide my legs over the side of the bunk bed, hop down, and run upstairs to the bathroom. Our bedroom was in the far end corner of a finished basement. My dad used to play music when he used the restroom, so it was normal hearing music coming from the bathroom. That's how you knew Dad was in there. On this particular night, I heard the faint melodies of Gary Newman's Cars playing, and it comforted me. The song ended, but then it replayed itself. That song was on repeat for maybe 40 minutes. My dad always had a playlist of some random cool 80s songs he burned on a CD. So it was very weird to hear the same song playing over and over like that. I went upstairs to check it out, and the bathroom door was cracked open, with the light seeping through the slight opening. I opened the door completely, and no one was in there. But the song continued to play. I turned off the stereo and turned out the light. As soon as I got back to my bedroom, I heard the song come back on. It did not make any sense. I had never had anything like this happen to me before. I got a strange feeling in my gut. So I ended up having to wake up my dad and have him turn it off. The next night, things were a little different. My brother and I went to bed as usual, and I was woken up with the same damn urge to go and use the bathroom like the night before. I turned over, looked over at the clock tower, and it read 2 a.m. It was pretty early, I thought. As I leaned to my left and lifted my leg over to the side of the bed, I suddenly came to a stop. I was frozen. I could not move. My body was completely paralyzed. As I was there, with half of my right leg over the side of the bunk bed, right there in front of me on the floor was a boy. He was sitting in a fetal position, holding his knees to his chest. His skin was blue, with a strange, ominous glow to it. He had on what looked like some sort of black bathrobe. His knees were tucked into it and his arms were supporting them. His face was long with 2 empty spaces for eyes. There was a definite shape to them, but they were just deep voids where his eyes should be. He didn't have a nose or a mouth. He looked like he was shivering, holding his limbs close to himself. I could hear my brother lightly snoring beneath me, and I was terrified for his safety. I had thousands of thoughts racing through my mind with nothing coming close to any sort of explanation to what I was seeing. I wanted to scream and cry at the same time, but I was frozen in that same spot. I finally gained some strength, and I pulled my leg up back towards my bed, in which I noticed that movement had startled him. He turned his head in an unnatural way and started looking at me. He was just sitting there, staring at me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew generally where they were. It was like looking into a well to try to see to the bottom. I looked at him for what felt like 2 hours. I was still frozen and couldn't force myself to move. I really couldn't speak or even breathe properly. I was stuck. The boy eventually looked away from me. It was a calming feeling once he looked back at the wall. At least I wasn't getting his attention anymore. The only thing I could think to do was slowly move myself under my covers and try to just hide. So that's what I did. I slowly and carefully shuffled beneath my covers and turned towards the wall, and eventually I fell asleep. The next morning, he was gone. No sign of him ever being there or leaving. I told everyone I knew about him, and most of my friends and family did believe me. To this day, I have not forgotten him. It's been 19 years, and I can still see him as clear as day in my mind. Seeing that entity inspired a lifelong search of the paranormal, searching for something that will help me to understand what I saw, but I feel as if I will never know what I saw. Number 5. Summer Camp Ghost Story. So, I attended a local summer camp for 7 years of my childhood in the late 2000s to early 2010s, from age 8 to 15. Just like every other summer camp, we had our own ghost stories. The story of Green Eyes, Old Man Jack, you know, the classics. Our camp, however, we were a little bit different. We had the story of Emma Lockwell. Emma Lockwell was a 12-year-old girl who attended my summer camp back in the 1970s. Back then, they held a weekly soccer camp for players in the general area to come together and basically live, breathe, and eat soccer for a week. Emma was in and out of the nurse's office all that week complaining of headaches. Each time she complained and ended up there, she was just given a pain reliever and continued on with her day. Thursday of that week, she was playing soccer on our field with her friends when suddenly the ball was kicked to her and she collapsed to the ground. The counselors didn't know what happened. She had been perfectly fine on that day. But as they carried her down to the main lodge of the camp, she officially passed away as she was laying there. It is quite tragic for someone to die so young of heart issues. But this is a very true story. I've seen the files myself. She was from my hometown, so I've seen the old news stories. Emma always wore a yellow raincoat. Rain or shine, she was in the yellow raincoat. Everybody knew this, and everybody knows about her story. One of my old favorite staff members at the camp said that she would see her every once in a while, sitting on the steps of her old cabin, crying in the rain. She became accustomed to seeing her and started to spread the story to everyone she could like wildfire. Eventually, that old cabin became unsafe for current campers, so they had to tear it down and rebuild to make sure everything was up to code. Though the whole cabin wasn't scrapped, one board from the wall was saved, and in classic summer camp fashion, they made a Ouija board out of it. Naturally, I had to play around with it on the day of her death in the spot where she died. But nothing happened. I promise everyone was okay. So now fast forward to present day. I haven't been to this camp in 5+ years, but I still remember it fondly. In about August of 2018, the paranormal world began to show up to me through some of my friends. Whenever something paranormal would start to happen, my friend Leia would tell me that a girl in a yellow raincoat was there, and she was very angry that I had stopped telling her story. She would scream and yell that I needed to speak up and say her story. Naturally, I complied. I didn't want to upset her any more than she already was. Some time had passed, and I had no issues until about November. I was sitting in Leia's apartment, just relaxing and decompressing after classes from that day. And she looks at me and tells me that she sees the little girl just standing and staring at us in her bathroom. She was just observing us, and I could feel the room drop in temperature. I was terrified, seeing as I was new to the world of paranormal experiences. Emma just stood there and watched us. Leia then accurately described to me the layout of the summer camp, despite me never speaking to her about it, or the fact that she had never been there, seeing as I now live 7 hours away from my home state. I was completely floored. I didn't understand how she could know these things, but despite my terror, I decided to move on from that experience. Over the next year, I would see her on and off, standing and staring at me in my room, and by this time, I became used to it. I accepted that she existed in my world, but I never acknowledged her directly. I never say her name or speak to her. Either way, I moved on and ended up moving to an apartment. This would be my current apartment. I've been here for approximately 6 months now, and I haven't had any issues with her being around. But then there was a night when that changed. It was just a regular night, nothing special about the date or anything. I was calm and relaxed and just ready to get some sleep. I am a college student after all, and sleep is incredibly important. I went to bed around 12:30 a.m., which is pretty standard for me. But then suddenly, I woke up around 3:30 a.m. I was drowsy, but I do keep my room slightly well lit at night with my pink salt lamp to keep the good vibes. I turned over in my bed towards a chair that I have in my room, which was clear of clothes and general clutter. But sitting there, staring at the wall, clear as day, was Emma Lockwell. Her long black hair rested on her back, and her head was down with her hands to her face, as if she was crying. I could tell there was a slight shake to her shoulders, and I was struck with this feeling of sadness. and I felt so much empathy for her. I took a moment to look at her, but eventually I managed to turn over and fall back to sleep. Why she appeared again after about 8 months of having no experiences, I will never know. All I know is that she is a poor girl who is deeply saddened by her untimely death, and I do hope that someday she will be able to move on and find happiness in whatever exists after death. This final story is rather very special to me. This story was submitted to my email by someone I know personally. So when she shared her story with me, it made her experience that much more terrifying. Without further ado, I present to you number 6. Never play the dark cards game. It was a long time ago that I reconnected with a young love. At the time, I had not realized that the man I was starting a relationship with was actually one of my first friends I had made when I first arrived to the United States. After building a relationship over the phone and reconnecting, I finally invited him over to my home to hang out with me and my younger sister. He had previously mentioned to me that he was a little sensitive to the paranormal, which I honestly thought it was really cool since I liked all that kind of stuff. The day he came to visit, we were all hanging out in the living room when he asked us if we wanted to play a game with cards. We needed 4 players, and there just happened to be 4 of us since he brought a friend with him, thinking maybe it could be a cool double date since my sister was there with me. Of course, we all said yes to the game. As he set it up, my sister and I brought out some pillows to place on the floor so we would be comfortable. We all sat down, and the first thing I noticed was the cards themselves. They were placed in 4 stacks. Each had their own symbols, and they looked to be stacked in order with the same symbols underneath, although they were upside down. He quickly explained the rules. He said that we can ask questions and we would get one of 4 answers. Yes, no, maybe, and no answer. It seemed harmless enough, so we began. We all held hands and we sat there quietly, waiting for him to communicate. It felt like forever, especially as he began to move in a weird circular motion. And then out of nowhere, he fell backwards. As tears filled his eyes, we all let go of each other's hands and jumped in surprise. He got up and laughed. We were all so confused because of his reaction. He calmly said that his spirit had left his body and he was floating around the room looking at us. Me and my sister looked at each other. I could tell we were both feeling a little uncomfortable, but didn't know if we should believe him or not. He then started asking questions without speaking any further about his experience. It seemed okay, so we all began to ask questions. We asked silly questions like, Is anyone there? Are you a boy or a girl? The questions were nothing too compromising or harmful. A little bit later, we decided to stop playing since there wasn't much happening, and he and his friend decided to leave. It must have been about 5 minutes after they left that my sister and I decided to play again, but just the two of us. Right after we started playing, my sister started to hear things, and so did I. We both freaked out and ended the game. As she was crying by the front door, begging for us to leave the house, I was facing the front door with my back towards the living room. My mom had a picture frame by the door, and as I'm trying to calm my sister down, I see a shadow in the reflection of the picture I'm facing, and it runs behind me, all while we are still hearing noises and feeling really uncomfortable. We both left the house running and quickly got on the phone to call my friend. He came back and said a few prayers and walked around the house, trying to get rid of whatever could have stayed there. We of course felt better after that, and so he left. He made sure we understood not to play the game without him. A few weeks later, I started to have some weird dreams and difficulty sleeping. I started sleeping with my radio on, but sometimes the volume would change, and other times the voice on the song would get deeper and faded. I then started sleeping with my television on and left my radio off. As I was having all of these different experiences, everything started to become darker for me. The first thing that happened was I woke up from a horrible nightmare due to feeling a sudden movement, and I realized I was halfway down my bed as if I had been pulled. A few days after that, I woke up around 6 in the morning and I was lying on my stomach. All of a sudden, I felt this weight on my back, and when I tried to get up, I couldn't. I got desperate as I was starting to lose air. As I tried to scream, no words would come out. I tried to get up, but it only became stronger and heavier. I was yelling and screaming, or so I thought. I kept repeating in my head, "Get off of me! Let me go!" And it felt like an eternity. I suddenly heard a firm, strong, and demanding voice say, "Let her go." I felt the relief off my back, and I heard footsteps run off my bed. Tiny footsteps. After that, I could finally get up and scream. I sat up, but for some reason, I was not scared. I felt peaceful and calm. My room felt alleviated, and all the eerie feeling was gone. Meanwhile, in my sister's room, she had her own experiences. I later found out she too has suffered from bad dreams. She said she was in a lifelike nightmare, and no matter what she did, she was unable to wake up. She mentioned to me as well that during her dream, she felt a cold, tiny hand placed on her forehead, and she heard a sweet, firm voice say, "Wake up." And she was finally free from her horrible nightmare. We come from a very religious family, and we grew up going to church. If you ask me, I know that those were our guardian angels looking out for us and our safety. After that, I never encountered anything else, and we never played that game again. Nor did we invite those people over to our home again. We have never spoken about those incidents, and it's something that we decided to leave in the past. Of course, we never told anyone in our family about what happened to us, but we will never do anything like that again. We have enough respect to leave all of that alone, and enough faith to know we walk in the light along our guardian angels. Hello, listeners. Thanks for listening to this episode of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. If you would like to submit some of your own true paranormal experiences for me to narrate on this channel, check the description down below and send them over to my email. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell to keep up with future episodes. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.